So this is the fourth and final week of my talks about Harry Potter. And we took a break last week because we had the beautiful Lisa Ferraro and Erica Luckett here. And it was amazing for those of you that were here. I know you were moved, and it was incredible. So we're going to go back and finish part 2 of Defense Against the Dark Arts. So once again, I need to start out and do a show of hands of folks that have seen or read the Harry Potter series. All right, a little harder today. So this is, because there's so many folks that have not, let me just say that Harry Potter is a modern myth. Like any great myth, it captures essential truths about the human experience. And one of the great things about it is it has likable characters, and not all myths do. So I really like that about it. So we're looking at what kind of wisdom, what kind of metaphysical truth can we pull out of this Harry Potter series. And to set a little bit of context, Harry finds out right around his 10th birthday that his parents were wizards. And he embarks upon this hero's journey, this journey of finding out who he is. And the meta story that's going on in the wizarding world is that Harry's parents were killed, and Harry ended up with a scar on his head because of a dark wizard who we later find out his name is Voldemort. And I'm going to talk about Voldemort in a very particular context, because the first clip is that we have, we're going to actually see him. So again, Defense Against the Dark Arts Part 2. This is all about fear. That's what we're talking about today, is fear. When we look at pulling meaning out of a myth, there's many, many ways to do it. The way that we're going to do it for the first part here is to think about the fact that we represent all the characters, or some part of ourselves represents every character. So in this case, the bad guy, Voldemort, the bad wizard, the dark wizard, is he's playing the part of our fears. He's playing the part of our fears.
There is a connection between the Dark Lord's mind and our own. Whether he is as yet aware of this connection is for the moment unclear. Pray he remains ignorant.
You mean if he knows about it, then he'll be able to read my mind?
Read it. Control it. Unhinge it. In the past, it was often the Dark Lord's pleasure to invade the minds of his victims, creating visions designed to torture them into madness. Only after extracting the last exquisite ounce of agony, only when he had them literally begging for death, would he finally kill them. Used properly, the power of our clemency will help shield you from access or influence. In these lessons, I will attempt to penetrate your mind. You will attempt to resist. Prepare yourself. Let's chill out. Concentrate, Potter. Focus.
So I want to draw your attention to a couple things that the guy with the greasy black hair, his name is Snape. A couple things that he says. And he says that, and remember, he's talking about Lord Voldemort, but we're talking about fear, right? It can unhinge us. It can terrify us. It can control us. You ever had that much fear? You ever had that much fear? Where you're like living not according to the choices you make, the ideals you hold, the dreams you have, the compassion you want to share, but according to what your fear says is safe enough for you to do. So what is it about fear that is so big that it can control us and unhinge us? Well, this thing we call fear is really complex, but here's the deal about it. So in an evolutionary sense, fear is what has allowed us to be here, right? If we didn't have, deep in our physiology, deep in the primary wiring of our humanity and our animal nature, if we didn't have a fear response, we would have been, right? Because it allowed us to identify danger and save ourselves. And so primary is it in our physiology that you guys have heard that we have a triune brain, right? So you have a forebrain, a midbrain, and a very basic brain, right? This is hardwired into the limbic system, the oldest part of the brain. I'm a little afraid to say anything because I'm looking at Monica and she knows these things, and I guess I'm afraid I'm going to get in trouble today. I need to just stop that. That's crazy.
Here they go.
Fear, right. Okay, so it's hardwired. It's a very old part of our nervous system, and it has been such a gift for us. And the way that we learn what kinds of situations are worthy of a fear response is, let's say you're walking through the forest, there's a snake there, you do this, and the next time you're walking through a forest, if you see movement, you go, oh, there might be a snake there, right? So, like, our capacity to form patterns is gorgeous and amazing, and so we form patterns of things, and we begin responding not to what's happening all the time, but to some shadow of a pattern that we formed when fear was an appropriate response. Now, that's a beautiful thing that's kept us alive. Unfortunately, what can also happen is that whole fear response can be triggered when there's absolutely nothing wrong. Because we don't live in the jungles anymore. We don't live in the plains anymore. We don't encounter the same types of situations, for the most part, that very quickly reacting, hardwired response is necessary or useful. Now, sometimes it is, but not nearly as much as it was when we lived a little closer to nature and danger was a little bit more imminent. So what I want to do is look at this same clip again, the same fear clip, and I'm going to actually, what I'd like for you to look at are the visions that Harry sees, right? So all of those very quickly flashing things, watch those.
There is a connection between the Dark Lord's mind and your own. Whether he is as yet aware of this connection is for the moment unclear. Pray he remains ignorant.
You mean if he knows about it, then he'll be able to read my mind?
Read it, control it, unhinge it. In the past, it was often the Dark Lord's pleasure to invade the minds of his victims, creating visions designed to torture them into madness. Only after extracting the last exquisite ounce of agony, only when he had them literally begging for death, would he finally kill them. Used properly, the power of our clemency will help shield you from access or influence. In these lessons, I will attempt to penetrate your mind. You will attempt to resist. Prepare yourself. Let him out.
So there's this great phrase that I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous about fear, and it is that what we fear is that we're going to lose something we already have or not get something that we desire. So we're going to lose something we already have or not get what we desire. And you see flashes from people that Harry loves, and he's afraid, right? The other part of that is that we're not going to get something that we desire. So here's another interesting thing about the humankind's ability to make patterns, this thing that has allowed us to evolve to the state that we're in today. We can actually make patterns of things that haven't happened yet, and that's called imagination. Right? That's allowed us to actually make new things. We imagine them. And that's what's allowed us to evolve and make the kind of changes we have in our cultures at the rate that we have. So now we can imagine possible outcomes that have fear involved in them, like something's going to go terribly wrong, somebody I love is going to get hurt. We can imagine all of those things. Right, well, this faculty of imagination, I want to say this. This faculty of imagination, it's our greatest blessing. It's also, can be, when it's misused, our greatest curse. That we can imagine things going wrong. And we can set off that whole fear response in ourselves, not based on anything that's already happened, not based on anything that's happening, but based on some thing that we've created in our minds that could possibly get around to fixing to happen. Or not. So if we have this capacity to imagine, and it can set off our fears, and if that ability to make patterns is what actually has kept us alive, and like so many things, the very things that keep us going or bring us to a certain point in our own evolution begin to hold us back after a certain point. So Ernest Holmes, the founder of Science of Mind and Spirit, he says something really fascinating about fear. And it's directly related to this ability to imagine, right? What Ernest Holmes says is that fear is a mental attitude, and as such it can be converted into something else. Fear is the reverse mental attitude to faith. So let me read that again and then flesh it out a little bit. Fear is a mental attitude, so something going on up here, and as such can be converted into something else. Fear is the reverse mental attitude to faith. Okay, so what if faith is our ability to pattern forward that everything is going to be good or work out the way that we desire it to work out, or God's got the deal, whatever our version of the faith message is. Does that make sense to everybody? Faith is the ability to imagine that things are going to work out. Fear is the ability to imagine that they aren't. The capacity that you have for fear is identical to the capacity that you have for faith. They are not two things. They're the same thing, used helpfully or destructively. I'm going to say that one more time, because there are people that are almost paralyzed by fear. The capacity that you have for fear is the same capacity you have for faith. I swear it. Ernest Holmes also says that to overcome fear is the greatest adventure of the mind of man. That's not the best news I've ever heard, frankly. But it's this, do you see that the ability to make patterns is what has brought us to where we are? The ability to imagine patterns forward is what has helped us to evolve quickly, so we can't get rid of it. I mean, it's integral to our capacities as human beings. But we can and do misuse it. So this thing, we have to transform it. That's the choice. Because we don't want to give up the gifts of the capacity. What we want to give up is the shortcomings or the misuse of it. Okay, so this next flip is really just kind of for fun. I think I've already talked about most of it, but it's kind of fun. So, here you go.
So terrifying, yes. Luckily, a very simple charm exists to repel a boggart. Let's practice it now. Without wands, please. After me. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Very good. A little louder. Very clear. Listen. Ridiculous. Ridiculous.
This class is ridiculous.
Very good. Well, so much for the easy part. You see, the incantation alone is not enough. What really finishes a boggart is laughter. You need to force it to assume a shape you find truly amusing. Let me explain. Neville, will you join me, please? Come on, don't be shy.
Mommy, Harry Potter.
Look. Now, what frightens you most of all? Sorry?
Professor Snape.
Professor Snape. Frightens all. And I believe you live with your grandmother.
Yes, but I don't want that boggart to turn to her either.
No. It won't. I want you to picture her clothes. Only her clothes very clearly in your mind.
She carries a red handbag.
You don't need to hear. As long as you see it, we'll see. Now when I open that wardrobe, here's what I want you to do. Can you do that? Yes. Wand at the ready. 1, 2, 3. Think, Neville, think.
Ridiculous!
Wonderful, Neville, wonderful, incredible. Okay, to the back, Neville. Everyone form a line. Form a line. I want everyone to picture the thing they fear the very most and turn it into something funny. Next. Rock. Concentrate. Listen. Be brave.
Ridiculous!
Good enough. All right. So that, a boggart. She can't hold you right now, honey. A boggart. right? This is something that takes the shape of your deepest fear. So let's just talk about your deepest fears. And what do you do about them? That capacity to imagine, you just reimagine. And so in neuro-linguistic programming, I think they call this a reframe. You actually take one thing and you reframe it and look at it with a different story attached to it. We call it a different story, right? And move yourself from the thing that you're afraid of to the thing that is manageable, is gone, is non-threatening. See, here's the thing. One of the things I know about fear, I was having a conversation with Ronnie, I think it was last weekend, complimenting him, because I actually run into a lot of people who, like when you say, oh, well, okay, so you're afraid to do that. Well, no, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. And then they give you the what I call fear by other names, right? Which is, I don't have time, I haven't gotten around to it, avoidance or delay. There's the, I don't want to do that, when you know they really kind of do want to do that, but they're afraid. Right? So the first thing is you gotta look right at it. You gotta look right at it and call it what it is. If there's something we want to do and we avoid doing it, especially if it has to do with a deep desire, it's called fear. It's called fear. And you can't get away from it. But you can change it. You can change it. Joseph Campbell says, it is by going down into the abyss that we recover the treasures of life. Where you stumble, there lies your treasure. Where you stumble, there lies your treasure. So the thing that we're afraid of oftentimes, that is the door to our dreams. It is our treasure is behind that. And so there's two things that I know. There's telling ourselves a new story about it. Right? The story isn't that we're not afraid. The story is putting roller skates on the spider. The story is shifting it. It's putting a ridiculous hat on a mean professor. Right? So we tell ourselves a new story. The thing is, we have to have enough time to tell ourselves the new story. And so we have to create a little bit of a gap between the thing that sets off our fear and our movement away from it. And you know how you do that? Breathe. 10 deep breaths. So why 10 deep breaths? So this fear that's hardwired into us sets off this whole chain of events that go on in our bodies. And because the whole fear reaction was formed at a time when, threat of danger, threat past, system has to restore itself very quickly to reset, to get on with things, right? So it actually takes about the equivalent of the time it takes to take 10 deep breaths for your system to begin to rebalance. Unless you think the scary thought again, in which case you can trigger the whole thing, right? So you take 10 deep breaths when you feel it, or when you can name it, because like I said, sometimes we're not in touch with the fact that we're afraid. But it really is true that 10 deep breaths can restore us to sanity, or to choice. And at the point that we're restored to choice, we can tell a new story. Right? So one of the places that we, I want to give an example. Okay, here's a great example. You look at your checkbook, and you look at your bills, and there is a mathematical discrepancy between the two. And I don't know about y'all, maybe it's just me. I've always said that I'm up here because I'm the one that needs most to be reminded of this. But like this, like, yeah, freeze. Like, scared. Checkbook, bills. Number, not equal. Right? What I have learned to do is breathe. Just learn to breathe. So I take 10 deep breaths, and my stomach unclenches, and I'm not breathing from here anymore. And then I can tell myself a new story about what I'm seeing. Right? There is no lack in God. Every need of mine is cared for by the universe. I can tell a new story. And the story that we tell either directly creates or partly creates the experience that we're having. So I'm going to take 10 deep breaths. Does that mean somebody's going to dump $1,000 into my checking account? I don't know. I'm not going to rule it out because I've had strange things happen. But what I know is that I have been restored to a place of sanity and balance, and I can tell myself a new story about what's going on with those numbers. And it's not easy. The only way that we do that is to go to class and practice. You know, the same thing happens when this child right here, who's rather adventurous, I mean, we often see her doing very adventurous things, and it's like, it's scary. And then I have to turn around and walk away and take some deep breaths and remind myself that she has she is under divine protection. She is cared for, she is safe, she is free, she is whole, she is healthy. I tell myself this new story. But I'm not going to tell myself the new story. I'm holding my breath and deeply afraid. So, you know, they're really... in the grand scheme of things, in the science of mind and spirit, we don't subscribe to the view that there is a power for good and there is a power for evil. Really, there's just one power, and we forget. So there's only love, like we sing. There's only love, and then we forget. And so perhaps the opposite of love is fear. So the only thing that there's an irony in that the only thing that we have to defend against, fear, we can't. We just have to shift it into faith. But it's the same thing. So what I want to leave you with is, if you have a story that you're never afraid, you're lying. I want to tell you that first. And if you have a great capacity to fear and know it, what I really want you to remember, what I really want to leave you with today, is that only means one thing. And that's that you have a great capacity for faith. Let's pray. So the word that comes to mind is transmute. The adventure of our lifetime, the adventure of our human experience is that we can transmute what was into what can be. I'm remembering that there is one life, and that life is the life of God. It is everywhere. It is all powerful. It is all we will ever need. It's all we ever can need. It's all we're ever going to be. That life, that God's life, is living itself in, as, and through each one of us, so that we are the way that God shows up and grows up in form, in flesh. not bound by flesh, because there is something about transmuting what is in us, what is hardwired in us, to what can be. I'm remembering that there's nothing that we need to acquire to do this, to live our dreams, to be who we choose to be, to extend ourselves in compassion and love. There's nothing that we need to acquire. There's simply the process of transmuting what is here and bringing it forth. One life, God's life. No mistakes in that. So when I remember that, I actually can live Easter every day. I can actually experience a rebirth every day, a greater possibility every day, a renewal of love every single day. And I believe that. I stand for that. I desire that. I claim that. When I remember that, it's enough. And so to the blessings of this day, and to the blessings of this life, we say thank you. And so it is.